What happens when a prince refuses to back down from the most ruthless interviewer on television? Tonight, we witness something that will go down in broadcasting history. A clash so intense that it ended with security being called and a royal being escorted from the studio. Before we dive into this incredible story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think about what you're about to hear. Because this is unlike anything you've ever seen on live television. The tension was palpable from the moment Prince Harry walked onto the set of Piers Morgan uncensored. Morgan, known for his aggressive interview style and his history of criticizing the royal family, had been building up to this moment for months. The promotional campaign promised fireworks, but nobody could have predicted just how explosive this encounter would become. As the cameras rolled, Morgan wasted no time diving into controversial territory. "Your Royal Highness," he began, his voice dripping with barely concealed disdain. Or should I say, former Royal Highness? Since you seem to have abandoned that title, along with your duties to the British people. Prince Harry, dressed in a sharp navy suit but with tension evident in his posture, shifted forward in his chair. "Piers, I came here for a civilized conversation about my charitable work and my new initiatives. If you're going to start with personal attacks, perhaps we should reconsider this entire interview." Morgan's trademark smirk spread across his face. "Oh, but personal attacks are exactly what you've been launching at your own family for years. Now, aren't they? The difference is, I'm not hiding behind carefully crafted statements and ghostwriters. I'm saying it to your face." The studio audience, handpicked for their diverse opinions, began to murmur. Some shifted uncomfortably in their seats, while others leaned forward, sensing the brewing storm. The production crew, initially confident in their ability to manage the interview, exchanged worried glances as they realized this was spiraling beyond their control. "You know what, Piers?" Harry's voice took on a harder edge, his carefully maintained composure beginning to crack. "I expected this from you. You've made a career out of tearing people down, haven't you? But let me be clear about something. I didn't abandon my duties. I made a choice to protect my family from the very toxicity you're displaying right now." Morgan leaned back in his chair, clearly enjoying the reaction he was provoking. "Protect your family? You mean the same family you threw under the bus in front of millions of viewers? The same grandmother you claimed was trapped in a system of oppression? The same father you painted as cold and uncaring?" The prince's jaw tightened visibly. Those were honest conversations about real experiences. Something you wouldn't understand, considering your relationship with the truth has always been, shall we say, flexible. A sharp intake of breath rippled through the studio. Even Morgan's usually unflappable demeanor showed a crack of surprise. At the direct attack, the host had been in control of the narrative until that moment, but something in Harry's tone suggested the rules of engagement had just changed. Flexible relationship with the truth. Morgan's voice rose slightly, his professional mask slipping to reveal genuine anger. "That's rich, coming from someone who's been rewriting history to suit his victim narrative. Tell me, Your Highness, when did you become such an expert on truth?" Prince Harry stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the studio floor, with a sound that seemed to echo in the suddenly silent space. "The moment I decided to stop enabling people like you, Piers, the moment I realized that staying silent in the face of lies and manipulation wasn't noble, it was cowardice." The camera operators scrambled to adjust their angles, capturing every nuance of the escalating confrontation. Morgan, sensing he was losing control of his own show, also rose from his seat, his face flushed with indignation. "Cowardice." Morgan's voice cracked with emotion. "You want to talk about cowardice? Let's talk about running away when things got difficult. Let's talk about abandoning your military connections, your charitable patronages, your own country, all because you couldn't handle a bit of criticism." The studio fell into a heavy silence, the kind that precedes either reconciliation or total warfare. Harry's hands were clenched at his sides, his breathing visibly controlled as he struggled to maintain his composure. The audience sat frozen, unsure whether they were witnessing television history or a complete disaster. "You don't get to lecture me about service, Piers," Harry finally said, his voice low and dangerous. "You don't get to question my commitment to my country or my causes, and you certainly don't get to sit there and pretend you're some champion of truth. When you've built your entire career on sensationalism and character assassination." Morgan's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "Character assassination? I'm a journalist, Harry. I ask the tough questions that others are too afraid to ask. I hold people accountable for their actions. No, Piers, Harry shot back, his voice rising now. You're a bully with a platform. There's a difference between journalism and what you do, and deep down, you know it. The tension in the studio had reached a breaking point. Production assistants were frantically communicating through their headsets, unsure whether to cut to commercial or let the confrontation continue. The live audience sat in stunned silence, witnessing something that would be dissected and analyzed for years to come. Morgan, his professional composure completely shattered, pointed an accusatory finger at the prince. "How dare you come onto my show and ... your show?" Harry interrupted, his voice now filled with contempt. "This isn't journalism, Piers. This is a circus, and you're the ringmaster trying to make everyone dance to your tune." The words hung in the air like a challenge thrown down in a medieval court. Morgan's face contorted with rage, his carefully constructed television persona crumbling in real time. "You arrogant, entitled brat," he snarled, abandoning all pretense of professionalism. "You think because you were born into privilege, you can waltz in here and insult me on my own program." Harry's laugh was bitter and sharp, entitled, "That's interesting coming from someone who's made millions exploiting other people's pain. Tell me, Piers, how many careers have you destroyed? How many lives have you ruined for the sake of ratings?" The studio audience was now openly gasping at the exchange. Some were pulling out their phones, despite the strict no-according policy, sensing they were witnessing something unprecedented. The production crew had given up trying to maintain control, instead focusing on capturing every explosive moment. "I've exposed hypocrisy and held the powerful accountable," Morgan shot back, his voice shaking with fury. "Something your family has never had to face until you decided to air your dirty laundry in public." "Accountable?" Harry's voice rose to match Morgan's intensity. "You hacked phones, Piers, you invaded privacy, destroyed relationships, and when it all came crashing down, you ran to America with your tail between your legs, and you want to lecture me about running away?" The color drained from Morgan's face. The phone hacking scandal was a wound that had never fully healed, and Harry had just pressed directly on it. "That was never proven in court," Morgan stammered, his usual confidence evaporating. "Oh, so now we're hiding behind legal technicalities." Harry's voice dripped with disdain. "How convenient. You know what was proven? That you have no moral compass, that you'll destroy anyone if it serves your purposes, that you're exactly the kind of person who makes the world a darker place." Morgan's hands were trembling now. From rage or humiliation, it was impossible to tell. "You sanctimonious hypocrite," he spat. "You talk about making the world darker? You've single-handedly damaged the monarchy more than anyone in history. Your grandmother's final years were spent dealing with the chaos you created." The mention of his grandmother hit Harry like a physical blow. His face went pale, but his voice became deadly quiet. "Don't you dare bring my grandmother into this. Don't you dare use her memory to score points in your pathetic little game." "Your game," Harry Morgan pressed, sensing he'd found a nerve. "You started this war with your family. You chose to weaponize your personal grievances for profit. You turned your back on everything she stood for." Harry stepped closer to Morgan, close enough that the cameras could capture the fury in his eyes. "You want to know what she stood for? Duty, service, dignity. 3 things you've never understood. She spent her entire life putting others before herself, while you've spent yours putting yourself before everyone else." The studio was electric. With tension, even the hardened production crew seemed stunned by the raw emotion on display. Morgan, perhaps realizing he'd gone too far, tried to regain some composure. "Look, Harry, we're both passionate about our beliefs. Maybe we should, ... double quotes." "No," Harry cut him off sharply. "You don't get to play the reasonable card now. You wanted this fight, Piers. You've been building to this moment for years. Every snide comment, every cheap shot, every attempt to diminish my wife and my family. This is what you wanted." Morgan's attempt at reconciliation crumbled instantly. "Your wife? Oh, please. Let's talk about how she's manipulated you, how she's turned you against your own family, how she stopped." Harry's voice was like a whip crack. "You will not speak about my wife. You will not drag her into your manufactured drama. She's not here to defend herself against your lies. Lies. Morgan's voice reached a fever pitch. The truth is, she couldn't handle the pressure. She couldn't handle the scrutiny that comes with royal life. So she convinced you to burn it all down, rather than rise to the challenge. Harry's control finally snapped completely. The scrutiny, you mean the harassment, the stalking, the racist undertones in every article, the death threats? That's what you call scrutiny. Oh, here we go with the race card again, Morgan sneered. Everything's about race. With you two, isn't it? Can't take legitimate criticism without crying racism. The studio audience audibly gasped. Several people stood up, some heading for the exits, others shouting their disapproval. The confrontation had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Harry's face was a mask of controlled fury. Legitimate criticism. You call questioning my child's skin color legitimate criticism. You call the constant attacks on my wife's character legitimate criticism. You're not a journalist, Piers. You're a racist enabler who hides behind the guise of free speech. Morgan was now visibly shaken. How dare you call me a racist? How dare you? I've done more for racial equality than you ever have, by platforming bigots, by giving voice to hatred, by normalizing discrimination. Harry's voice was rising with each word. You've built your career on division, on turning people against each other. You've weaponized prejudice for profit. The production team was frantically trying to signal for a commercial break, but both men were too far gone to notice. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every moment of the spectacular meltdown. You know what your problem is, Harry? Morgan's voice cracked with emotion. You can't handle the fact that you're ordinary, that without the title, without the palace, you're just another celebrity trying to stay relevant, and it's eating you alive. Harry stepped back, his breathing heavy, his face flushed with anger. And you know what your problem is, Piers? You're a failed journalist who's turned into a professional provocateur. You've confused being controversial with being relevant. But deep down, you know you're just a sad, bitter man who's run out of things to say. The confrontation had reached a point of no return. Both men stood facing each other, neither willing to back down, their mutual contempt filling the studio like a toxic cloud. The silence that followed was deafening. Both men stood locked in a stare that could have cut glass, their chests heaving from the intensity of their exchange. The studio audience sat in stunned silence, witnessing two grown men tear each other apart on live television. Morgan, his face now a dangerous shade of purple, took a step forward. You want to know what's really sad, Harry? You had everything. The respect of a nation, a platform to make real change, and you threw it all away. For what? A Hollywood lifestyle and a victim complex. Harry's voice was dangerously quiet now, the calm before the storm. I threw it away, or did I choose to walk away from a system that protects predators and punishes victims? A system that you've been cheerleading for decades. Predators. Morgan's voice cracked with indignation. You're talking about your own family, Harry. The same people who raised you, who gave you everything you have. Everything I have. Harry laughed bitterly. You mean the trauma, the constant surveillance, the inability to grieve my mother in private because people like you turned her death into entertainment? The mention of Princess Diana sent a visible shudder through the studio. Morgan's expression shifted slightly, perhaps recognizing he was treading on sacred ground, but his pride wouldn't let him back down now. Your mother understood what public service meant, Morgan said, his voice slightly softer, but still defiant. She didn't run away when things got difficult. She faced her challenges head-on. Harry's face went white with rage. Don't you dare invoke my mother's memory to justify your behavior. She died running from photographers, peers, people like you. Killed her with your insatiable appetite for invasion and exploitation. The accusation hung in the air like a death sentence. Morgan's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, unable to form words. The studio audience was completely silent now, the weight of Harry's words settling over everyone present. That's not fair, Morgan finally managed to whisper. That's not fair, and you know it. Fair? Harry's voice rose to a roar. Fair? You want to talk about fair? Was it fair when you published private phone conversations? Was it fair when you hacked into personal voicemails? Was it fair when you destroyed people's lives for front-page headlines? Morgan's composure completely cracked. I never hacked anyone's phone. I never authorized any illegal activity. I was cleared of all charges. Cleared by technicalities and legal loopholes, Harry shot back. But you knew what was happening. You profited from it. You built your career on stolen intimacy and violated privacy. And now you have the audacity to lecture me about fairness? The production crew was now openly panicking. The show had spiraled so far beyond their control that they were no longer sure if they should cut the feed or let it continue. The ratings were undoubtedly through the roof, but the legal implications were mounting by the second. Morgan, his journalistic instincts warring with his wounded pride, made one final desperate attempt to regain control. You know what, Harry? You're right. I'm not perfect. I've made mistakes. But at least I own them. I don't hide behind palace walls or cry oppression when people ask legitimate questions. Legitimate questions? Harry's voice was filled with contempt. Like asking about my unborn child's skin color? Like questioning my wife's mental health struggles? Like turning my family's private moments into public spectacle? Those are your legitimate questions. The public has a right to know, Morgan insisted weakly. When you're funded by taxpayers, when you represent the crown, transparency is... Transparency, Harry interrupted, his voice now dangerously low. You want transparency? Here's some transparency for you. You're a parasite, Piers. You feed off other people's pain. You profit from human misery, and you wrap it up in the flag of journalism to make yourself feel better about what you've become. Morgan's face twisted with rage and humiliation. Get out, he said quietly. Get out of my studio. Oh, now you want me to leave? Harry's voice dripped with sarcasm. Not when you can exploit this moment for maximum drama. Not when you can turn this into another ratings grab. I said get out, Morgan repeated, his voice shaking with barely controlled fury. Security escort His Royal Highness from the building. But Harry wasn't finished. You know what the real tragedy is? Piers, you actually had talent once. You could have been a real journalist, asked real questions, made a real difference. Instead, you chose to become a professional antagonist, a merchant of outrage. And for what? Money, fame, the approval of people who don't even respect you. 2 security guards appeared at the edge of the set, looking uncertain about whether they should actually approach a member of the royal family. The studio audience watched in fascination as the drama reached its crescendo. Morgan, his voice barely above a whisper but filled with venom, delivered his final shot. At least I didn't abandon my country and my duty for a Hollywood fantasy. At least I didn't betray everything I was raised to believe in for 30 pieces of silver. Harry smiled coldly. No, Piers. You betrayed it for much less than that. You betrayed it for ratings, for headlines, for the fleeting approval of people who will forget you the moment you're no longer useful to them. Turned toward the security guards, his dignity intact despite the chaos around him. Gentlemen, I'll see myself out. I've said everything I came here to say. As Harry walked toward the exit, Morgan called out one final time. This isn't over, Harry. This conversation will follow you for the rest of your life. Harry paused. At the studio door, turned back with a calm smile, and delivered his parting words. No, Piers, it's over for you. The world just saw who you really are, and no amount of spin is going to change that. But Morgan wasn't finished. His pride wounded beyond repair, he made one last desperate attempt to salvage something from the wreckage. Walk away then, just like you always do. Run back to your mansion and your Netflix deals. But remember this, you'll never escape what you are. A failed prince who chose celebrity over duty. Harry stopped in his tracks, his hand on the door handle. For a moment, it seemed like he might turn around and reignite the confrontation. The studio held its collective breath, waiting to see if the prince would take the bait one final time. Instead, Harry's shoulders relaxed, and he spoke without turning around. You know what, Piers? You're absolutely right about one thing. I did choose. I chose my wife over your approval. I chose my children's future over tradition. I chose truth over comfortable lies. And I chose love over hate. If that makes me a failed prince in your eyes, then I'll wear that label with pride. The words hit Morgan like a physical blow. He stumbled backward, his face contorting with a mixture of rage and something that might have been respect. The studio audience, many of whom had been Team Morgan at the beginning of the interview, were now clearly moved by Harry's final statement. You think you're so noble, Morgan whispered, his voice barely audible but picked up by the sensitive studio microphones. You think you're some kind of hero in this story. Harry finally turned around one last time, his eyes meeting Morgan's across the destroyed set. I'm not a hero, Piers. I'm just a man who got tired of pretending that your version of normal was worth preserving. The difference between us is that I'm willing to pay the price for my choices. Are you? The question hung in the air as Harry pushed through the studio doors and disappeared into the corridor beyond. The cameras captured Morgan standing alone on his set, surrounded by the debris of his own making, his mouth opening and closing as if trying to find words that would never come. The studio audience began to file out in stunned silence, many of them clearly shaken by what they had witnessed. Production assistants scrambled to restore some semblance of order, but the damage was done. The show that was supposed to be Morgan's triumphant return to relevance had become his public execution. As the dust settled and the cameras finally stopped rolling, one thing was crystal clear. This wasn't just a television interview gone wrong. This was the moment when two worlds collided, when old media met new values, when the establishment faced a reckoning it wasn't prepared for. And in that collision, only one man walked away with his dignity intact. The studio fell into stunned silence as Prince Harry disappeared through the exit, leaving Piers Morgan standing alone on his set, his career potentially in ruins, his reputation shattered, and his show in chaos. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every moment of his humiliation, the very thing he had tried to inflict on others for so many years. So there you have it, one of the most explosive confrontations in television history. What did you think of this incredible clash? Was Harry justified in his anger? Or did he go too far? Hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments, who do you think won this battle of words?